Hello, welcome to Being Reintegrated. This is Tim Wright. We're doing a walkthrough through the emblematic images of Daniel Cramer. I've wanted to do this project for a while, and finally, we're getting to the end of the cycle of material that I wanted to get produced. So the study has been great, and there's been a lot of material released by Kim Publishing, but one of the original ones was the Spiritual Exercises of Daniel Cramer. Now, for the spiritual exercises of Daniel Cramer, I intended to make a bunch of YouTube videos, but during the process, I realized the expansion of being reintegrated would go so far that, I could push it to its limits. Well, in the process, I invented the software platform OmniShelf. And what that does is it allows you to view a PDF alongside a video. So this Daniel Cramer work was always intended to be done as video commentary, but I couldn't necessarily get it into the mode that I wanted to. Well, now I have the tools, the programming, and assistance with a text. So we got the spiritual exercises of Daniel Cramer, which I can finally do what I intended to do. So now I'm not sure exactly how this will go, how many videos it'll be, how much we're going to go through. I wrote this one in 2023, I think, and I was very impressed by Daniel Cramer's images, as everyone is. But what I didn't know is that it modeled a significant spiritual development in history that hasn't really been done in this way. So as part of these images, this emblematic history, there's a lot there. But I wanted to go into, since it was what's called a pericope, which is a spiritual cycle of teaching, I wanted to turn it into a universalist pericope. So it escapes the Rosicrucian groups, it escapes Masonry, it escapes alchemy, and then turn it into kind of a perennial pericope, if you want to use some words. So I went through one by one and got the images and got the quotes and did a lot of comparison there. Now I connected it with the Gospel of Thomas. And the Gospel of Thomas that I like is actually a highly regarded version, even though it didn't have the publishing power that I would have wanted it to have. It was the Kabbalistic Words of Jesus, published by Louis Kaiser, who was a biblical scholar and worked a lot on the Jesus seminar stuff, but it just didn't have the up and go power that it needed. To go through the screen of modernity, and books were starting to change. Self-publishing was coming out. So I actually do have a PDF of that book, one of my favorite books. So what happens is this first image, Mollesco, it means I soften. And you can read the book. It's a guide to help you to kind of journal through this stuff. But this emblematic alchemy is very important to start understanding. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm giving you a little bit more information on why this tradition is so important. It's not just your heart is telling you the right way. I mean, it is, but it's not really going to be discursive. And that's one of the big things that has to be understood. In a series of spiritual exercises like this, which I said in the introduction, Dan Mercure calls pretty much the Scala Contemplationis. It's the ladder of contemplation. We find that the text itself is not the method that's being used. The method that's being used is the object meditation that you're doing, which I learned about through Buddhism. I learned that in meditation, you have analytical meditation and you have what they call calm abiding. Calm abiding is getting your mind to settle down so you're not constantly evaluating the world around you in epistemological terms. And then you use that calm abiding to go into object meditation, which is their analytical meditation. Now, I'm not an expert, though I have consulted expert sources, and it could be wrong. I mean, Geshe Shearing was the one that I learned a lot of this from, which is essentially Buddhism breaks down into two truths. And those two truths are there's an absolute reality, which none of us can really understand. And then there's the relative truth, which is the relative reality, which we totally understand and experience. Now, part of this is giving an object for the experience that's being had for the relative truth apprehension. So the mind is giving data all about the relativity of the situation, and that's not to be dismissed or negated through some kind of, spiritual upmanship. So I really like the way that Lewis provides a grounded perspective from biblical scholarship on this particular Gospel of Thomas. He does upper and lower textual criticism, goes through it, starts to show us more and more of the nuance of the Aramaic, what was spun by Gnostic organizations, and then eventually what was discarded in his reconstruction. So, the first image is Mollesco, and it softens. You're supposed to soften your evaluatory mind into what the Buddhists call, or actually my favorite branch of Vajrayana Buddhism, which is the Kagu, they call Mahamudra. It's the Great Seal. It's a seal that's put over the experience to show that you actually did experience enlightenment. And what it essentially does is it says that if you conceptualize enlightenment, you're not enlightened. This is one of the key giveaways for anybody who's out there blading. They don't realize that, there's actual experts that are watching all of this stuff. Like Hanegraaff did, he went into, Walter Hanegraaff went into the New Age world and started to analyze all the books that were being written about psychic phenomena and overshadowing and, channeling and stuff like that. And he actually studied it. Well, likewise, I have been studying phenomenology for a very long time, looking at the mechanisms that religious thinking combines together to try to get their perceptual world together. And so they present it because it's done through words and it's done through doctrine. And so that is what I would call the discursive model. And that is relative and it's still valid. It's just not ultimate. And for me as a phenomenologist, I go toward the ultimate reality, whatever that is. And I found the best thing is, like I said, the Mahamudra, which is that when there's a seal put onto something, it means that your relative mind cannot comprehend the absolute, not seriousness, but the absolute impact that the situation has. So a lot of times I'll call this a teaching moment, because what'll happen is there'll be a relative situation that the brain will start working on, and that is actually a teaching moment for the brain to have an object to meditate on. So as we go through this non-discursive gnosis of the emblematic alchemy of Daniel Cramer, that kind of framework is very helpful. Now, it's not to say everything is an abstraction, and we go into that in the publishing world of Kim Publishing and the Bader work, and a lot of the Samartan work is about that too, which is to get you, this is all about heart, by the way, to get you to understand that your experience is actually not just limited to you, but that it consists of spiritual presences, it consists of metaphysical entities which you may not be aware of, and it also consists of grounds of reality which you may not be considering in your evaluation. That's why I like this Illuminism material so much, because it goes deeply into this realm of what is real, like Morpheus told Neo in the Matrix. What is real? Is it your day-to-day job? Is it your experience of emotional connection to another human being? I mean, what is reality? We just found in 2025 science showing a bigger reality than we could even fathom. What happens when two black holes collide? I found a lot of this in Frank Close's work on antimatter, which essentially what he said after he gave the structure of what this quantum reality was, is that whenever matter pops up, there's an equivalent antimatter that balances out that matter's appearance. And this is similar to Mahamudra, that whenever you made an evaluation with discursive mind, so is there another realm of non-discursive awareness in reality that is conditioned by that discursive mind. So this is why I like the emblematic work so much, is it suspends your ability to evaluate. Like if we look in Mollesco, we see a hammer hand from out of the cosmos hammering on a heart. Well, that would seem like you're being softened and you're being turned into something that has no boundaries and no limits and no fixed parameters. But actually, what's happening is it's a teaching moment, instilling into you that my evaluation of the world and all of the elements that my brain is evaluating is merely a student of the experiential master, of learning what it's like to be aware of a situation without actually being aware of a situation. The mind is kind of caught in a chewing loop, is what I call it. In Mahamudra, the mind its job is to be clear and to know. And whatever you put onto it, it will reflect back to you more and more and more content based on that. So the Mollesco says, let go of yourself and all that is not yourself. Then you will see that everything that happens in the present moment is already perfect. And that's what Meister Eckhart says. Meister Eckhart was a major German theologian, and he did it in a way that I think aligns with Mahamudra, because he did it the negative way. Not negative, emotionally negative, but negative in the sense that there is no positive ascription of evaluation and foundation to what's being said. So Eckhart is almost saying, like Richard Duke the Palatine, that God can only be experienced through a negation of the mind's awareness of this presence. Now, I know that totally contradicts some things, and that's why Eckhart is so controversial, because in this world of thinking, it's called the apophatic, apophatic, coming from the Greek, without structure theology, as opposed to the cataphatic, which is pretty much what we see as structure, rigidity, concepts, metaphysical constants, and what the Gnostics call hypostases. That is how we know that something is discursive into the cataphatic realm, or non-discursive, which is the apophatic realm. But the problem is that, and this is what the Mahamudra reality really is that you can't use apophatic reality to negate cataphatic reality, and vice versa. You cannot use cataphatic reality to tell you that apophatic reality is not there either. So the beauty of someone like Meister Eckhart is he doesn't say, oh, it's only this and never this, or it's only this and never this. He actually crosses the lines pretty well into what's called the via negativa. And that is where you negate more and more of the mind structure and evaluation, and you get deeper and deeper into this what's called non-discursive reality. Well, that is essentially what the heart doctrine is in esotericism. It's getting, and it's essentially what happens is we try to build up this massive structure, this massive understanding, this cataphatic model that actually falls apart. And what's called the Greek reintegration apoktasis, we actually lose those structures. And this is what the thanatological understanding of this gnosis really is that you have to die to your cataphatic constructions. Even though they're very realistic, just like the scientist, when they collide two atoms together, they get a experience in the Hadron Collider. They get an experience that they could not define outside of that collision. This is why apophatic theology is so helpful, because it'll smash right into your cataphatic theological ideas. And then when the apophatic and the cataphatic crush, the idea of the mind is clear and knowing in the Mahamudra seal. Super profound stuff that when I found it, I felt very blessed to be able to not grasp it, but to be able to get into the zone where I had the smells and the sights and the experience of, temperature of the Mahamudra reality. Because for me, that was the crushing of the evaluatory mind and the crushing of the negating mind. It was the actual seal of enlightenment. And that's what I found is what it is. It's a very difficult state to get to, which is, it's told without explanation in the Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisattva. You go beyond the beyond, and then you open the door to the powers that are available once you've gone there. Now, some of this could be a little bit in error, and parse my words and find out what I'm saying that's wrong. And of course, I mean, this is a layman's interpretation of deep Buddhist Vajrayana doctrines. So I'm not a doctor. I did not go to school like Robert Thurman. I am not a geshe. I'll have some modesty there, but I have studied a lot of this material. So the Mahamudra is what I'm trying to get to. There's maybe a nuance. The cataphatic doesn't connect to the apophatic, and all that stuff. But that's how I see it. So thank you for humoring me and being able to talk about this, because when we get to the heart, we're able to experience the full complexity of reality. And it's not the emotional heart of the subjective individual, it's the heart, the processing unit of both sides of that Mahamudra seal. It's the, oh my God, there's things that exist and they never won't exist because that's how reality is formed. But there's also experience of reality beyond what we can even conceive of, which Terence McKenna told us, reality is not stranger than you think, it's stranger than you can think. That is kind of a Mahamudra approach in the language of Hermeticism to getting to there. So this is what the softening of the mind does in the Buddhist teaching. And we pulled the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, quotes from the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Corpus Hermeticum, and then there's an Ignatian relationship to it. All of that is available once you start to understand how this emblematic alchemy works. So you break down everything, and once it's broken down, you don't re-amalgamate it so it becomes a metal that's stronger than the metal that was broken down. And that's supposed to be gold, but it's very difficult to get to gold philosophically, and not to mention physically. They found like trillions of tons of gold somewhere in space. But the point is that gold does not deteriorate under analysis. And so that's why it was so valuable, both empirically and non-empirically, for the ancient medieval philosophers, because it was stability, it was strength, it was a stable structure that could be relied upon in matter, and therefore showing that there was a ground that everything fell to. Well, yes, in physical science, gold cannot be broken down, but it can be melted. It doesn't lose its goldness, but gold can lose its current form, and it can be melted further. Now, once it melts, it turns into a liquor, whatever it is in metallurgy, but it turns into a different form, but not a different substance. That's kind of what the mind does. You can melt the mind down, and what happens is, this is why the Buddhists are so amazing. They figured out, I don't know how, maybe through cosmic awareness, but they figured out that the mind does not fall below the function of being clear and knowing, that it will reflect whatever you put onto it unbiased. It'll reflect whatever you give it to tell you back, without any kind of stop. It will just keep going. So this is why it's so important to get your structural reality right, because your mind will reflect back to you as the mirror of the structure what you've given it. And if you're incorrect, the mind doesn't care if you're incorrect. You have to have a moment of softening to see that the mind actually does break down, because it will always break down. When you try to put it into form, the mind has already been clear in knowing. So this is why the Buddhist reality is so strong, to me anyway, is because whatever you put into it, it will reflect back to you. Thanks for watching.